The day Eliza Vane rode into Caldwell Creek, every man in town stopped breathing. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she sat tall in the saddle like she owned every inch of ground beneath her, though she did. They stopped breathing because of the badge pinned to her coat. U.S. Marshal. Federal jurisdiction. And a warrant with a name on it that made the saloon go quiet as a grave. The name was Kate Harlow. The most wanted man in the New Mexico Territory. Rustler. Outlaw. Ghost. The man she had spent 3 years hunting. The man who, 6 hours later, she would be hiding under her floorboards, bleeding, desperate, and begging her not to turn him in. She should have said no. God help her, she should have said no. If you've ever rooted for someone you knew you shouldn't, this story is for you. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single chapter, because where Eliza and Kate are headed, nothing is going to go the way you expect. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me, would you have hidden him? And let's get into the story. Caldwell Creek was the kind of town that had given up on itself. The paint peeled off every storefront like skin after a bad sunburn. The church at the end of Main Street had a cracked bell that hadn't rung in 2 years. The sheriff, if you could call him that, spent more time with a whiskey glass than a law book, and everyone in town had quietly made peace with the fact that justice was something that happened to other people, in other places. It was, in short, exactly the kind of town a man like Kate Harlow would use as a hiding place. And exactly the kind of town Eliza Vane had learned to read like a map. She had been doing this long enough to know the signs. The way conversations died when she walked into a room. The way eyes moved, not toward her, but away. The careful, practiced stillness of people who knew something and were determined not to show it. Caldwell Creek had that stillness in spades. She rode to the end of Main Street and tied her horse outside the only building with a lit lamp in the window, the sheriff's office. She didn't knock. Marshals didn't knock. The man behind the desk was exactly what she expected. 50, soft around the middle, with the red-threaded eyes of someone who drank to forget and had forgotten quite a lot. He looked up at her badge, then at her face, then back at the badge, as if hoping the second look would make one of them disappear. Neither did. "Marshal," she said, not as a greeting. As a statement of fact. He straightened slowly, the way men do when they realize the situation has gotten away from them. "Sheriff Aldous Briggs. What brings federal law to Caldwell Creek?" She placed the warrant on his desk without ceremony. A single sheet of paper, government stamped, bearing one name. He looked at it for a long moment. Something moved across his face, too quick to catch, too obvious to miss. "Harlow," he said, and his voice came out flat. Rehearsed. "You know him," she said. It wasn't a question. "Know of him. Same as everybody." She studied him the way she studied every person who lied to her, with patience and complete calm. "And if he were in this town, Sheriff, you'd tell me." Another pause. Just a breath too long. "Of course." She picked the warrant back up, folded it, and tucked it into her coat. "I'll be staying at the boarding house on 2nd Street. If your memory improves overnight, you know where to find me." She left him sitting there, sweating in a cold room. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Garrett who asked no questions, charged fair rates, and made a bean stew that could almost make you forget how far you were from anywhere civilized. Eliza ate alone at a corner table, her back to the wall, her eyes on the door, old habit, impossible to break. She had been tracking Kate Harlow for 37 months. She knew his face better than she knew her own. She had studied every report, every witness account, every half-burned letter recovered from abandoned campsites. She knew he was left-handed. She knew he rode a gray roan and had a scar along his jaw from a knife fight in Tucson 3 years before she ever heard his name. She knew he never stayed in one place longer than 2 weeks, except once, in a small town in Colorado, where he had apparently stayed for nearly 2 months before vanishing without explanation. She had always wondered about that. What she hadn't expected, what none of the reports had prepared her for, was the moment, just after midnight, when the window of her second-floor room slid open from the outside. Her gun was in her hand before she was fully awake. The figure that came through the window was tall, broad-shouldered, and bleeding badly from somewhere below his left ribs. He moved with the careful, controlled slowness of someone fighting to stay conscious through sheer force of will. He got one leg over the sill, then the other, then stood in her room in the dark. Breathing hard, hand pressed to his side, moonlight falling across his face. She knew that face. God help her, she knew that face. "Don't," he said, voice low, rough, stripped of everything but raw necessity. "Don't call out. Just, give me 30 seconds. Her gun didn't move. Neither did she. 30 seconds, she said. Talk. He looked at her with dark eyes that held no arrogance, no manipulation, just pain, and something that might have been the last edge of desperation. There are 3 men outside this town who want me dead. Not arrested. Dead. They've been paid to make sure I never make it to a federal courtroom. That's not my problem, she said. It will be, he said. Because whoever paid them doesn't just want me quiet. They want the file I'm carrying. He reached slowly, carefully, showing his hand the whole way, into his coat and produced a folded envelope, thick with papers. Names, Marshall. Dates. Transactions. Men in your government who've been taking money from the biggest land syndicate in the territory for 6 years. She didn't take her eyes off him. You're telling me you're innocent? No, he said, and something in his voice shifted, honest in a way that surprised her. I'm telling you I'm guilty of plenty. But not what's on that warrant. And the men who wrote that warrant are in this envelope. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. He was losing blood. She could see it now, the dark stain spreading through his shirt, the slight sway in his stance that he was working hard to hide. He was maybe 20 minutes from unconscious and an hour from dead without help. Her gun was still raised. Her mind was running through every protocol, every procedure, every oath she had taken in a federal courthouse in Santa Fe 4 years ago. And underneath all of it, quiet, unbidden, unwelcome, was the memory of that file note she had read 8 months ago. The one that had nagged at her ever since. The arrest report that didn't quite add up. The witness who had recanted and then disappeared. She lowered the gun. 1 inch. Then another. Sit down before you fall down, she said. And if one word of this turns out to be a lie, I will drag you to Santa Fe myself in chains. He sat. Slowly, heavily, with the relieved collapse of a man who had been holding himself together by willpower alone. Yes, Marshall, he said quietly. And just like that. Against every instinct, every rule, every rational thought in her head, Eliza Vane chose the most dangerous thing she had ever done. She chose to listen. The wound was deep but clean. Whatever had caught him had gone in sharp and come out fast, a knife, not a bullet. That told her something. Guns were for strangers. Knives were for men who knew you well enough to get close. She worked in silence, tearing strips from a spare shirt in her saddlebag, pressing hard against the bleeding. He didn't make a sound. Not once. He sat with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the middle distance, breathing slow and deliberate, the way men do when they've learned that pain is something you manage, not something you feel. She had known men like that. She had buried a few of them too. Who did this? She asked. Not out of concern. Out of habit. Information was information. Man named Doyle, he said. Rides for the Hargrove Syndicate. He and 2 others picked up my trail outside of Tucson 4 days ago. 4 days, she said flatly. You've been running for 4 days and you came here. I came where the law was, he said. She almost laughed. You came to the woman whose job it is to put you in a cell. I came to the only person I knew wouldn't be bought, he said, and there was something in his voice when he said it, quiet, certain, that made her hands still for just a moment before she kept working. She tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels, looking up at him. Up close he was different from the wanted poster. The poster showed a dangerous man. And he was that. But there was something else in his face, a tiredness that went deeper than 4 days of running. Something that had been there a long time. How do you know I'm not bought? She said. Because if you were, he said simply, I'd already be dead. She stood, moved to the table, and opened the envelope. The papers inside were meticulous. Dates going back 6 years. Names she recognized. 2 of them judges, one a territorial commissioner, one a man she had personally reported to in Santa Fe not 8 months ago. Transaction amounts. Land parcels. Transfers that had been disguised as legal purchases but were, when you read them carefully, nothing short of organized theft on a massive scale. She read for a long time without speaking. Where did you get these? She said finally. Took them, he said. From a man named Hargrove. Edmund Hargrove. Owns half the territory on paper and the other half in practice. These are his private records, the ones he keeps off the books. You stole them. I recovered them, he said. There's a difference, depending on how the law was obtained in the first place. She looked at him over her shoulder. That's a very convenient distinction for a wanted man. Most true things are inconvenient, he said. Doesn't make them less true. She turned back to the documents. She was looking for the one thing that would either confirm everything he'd said or unravel it, a name she could verify independently, a date she could cross-reference against something she already knew. She found it on the 4th page. A date. A land transfer. A parcel in the Cimarron Valley. She knew that parcel. She knew it because 18 months ago she had investigated a claim that the previous owners, a family named Aldridge, had been driven off their land by paid gunmen. The case had been closed above her. She had been told the transfer was legal. She had filed her objection and been reassigned within the week. Her jaw tightened. The Aldridge land, she said quietly. Silence from behind her. She turned. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, not satisfaction, not smugness. Something more careful than that. You know about it, he said. I investigated it, she said. I was told to drop it. By whom? She looked at the documents again. Found the name she didn't want to find. Said nothing for a long moment. By the man on page 7, she said. The room felt smaller suddenly. The walls closer. She had spent 4 years believing she was on the right side of something, doing the work cleanly, filing the reports honestly, following the chain of command the way she had been trained. And now here she stood in a dark room in a town no one cared about, holding proof that the chain of command had been rotten for longer than she had been part of it. It was a particular kind of fury, the kind that comes not from surprise but from confirmation. She folded the documents carefully and set them on the table. Here is what happens now, she said. You stay in this room. You don't go near the window. You don't open the door. If anyone asks, there is no one in this room but me. He studied her. And the warrant? Is still valid, she said. Don't mistake what I'm doing for forgiveness. I'm not letting you go. I'm letting you wait. Wait for what? For me to find out if any of this is enough to matter, she said. And if it is, if these names are real and these transactions hold up, then we talk about what comes next. Together. He was quiet for a moment. Then, why? She picked up the lamp and moved toward the door that connected to the small back hallway. Because if what's in those documents is true, she said, then the warrant on your head was written by the same men who stole the Aldridge land and closed my investigation and reassigned me like I was furniture. She paused at the door. And I don't work for those men. She left him in the dark. She stood in the hallway for a long moment after the door closed. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been. She told herself it was the documents. The corruption. The confirmation of something she had suspected and been told to forget. She told herself that. She almost believed it. Outside, Caldwell Creek slept its uneasy sleep. Somewhere beyond the dark edge of town, 3 men were waiting. And inside a small room above a boarding house, a wounded outlaw sat alone with documents that could bring down half the territorial government, and the knowledge that for the first time in 4 days, someone had chosen not to turn him in. He didn't know what to do with that. He sat with it in the dark and wondered if it was enough to trust. Dawn came to Caldwell Creek the way it came to every broken-down town in the territory, slowly, reluctantly, as if the sun itself wasn't sure the place deserved another day. Eliza had not slept. She had sat at the small table by the window all night, the documents spread before her, reading and rereading until the names and numbers had burned themselves into the back of her eyes. By the time the first gray light crept under the curtain she had counted 11 names, 23 land parcels, and one very clear picture of how a man like Edmund Hargrove had quietly become the most powerful person in the New Mexico territory without anyone in Washington ever noticing, or caring to. She heard him stir in the next room just after 6. The creak of the floorboard, the careful movement of a man checking his wound, reassessing what his body could and couldn't do. A few minutes later, a quiet knock at the connecting door. She opened it. He looked better than he had any right to. Pale under the tan, moving with the careful economy of someone managing pain, but upright, clear-eyed, present. He had found water somewhere and washed the blood from his hands. Small thing. She noticed it anyway. You read everything, he said. It wasn't a question. Twice, she said. She stepped back and let him in. He moved to the table and looked at the documents without touching them, the way people look at things they've carried so long they've stopped seeing them clearly. Hargrove knows I took these, he said. He'll have men in every town between here and Santa Fe. Then we don't go to Santa Fe, she said. He looked at her. We. She met his gaze evenly. These documents need to reach a federal judge who isn't on that list. There are 2 in the territory I'd trust. One is in Albuquerque. One is in a town called Mercy, 3 days northeast. Mercy, he said quietly, and something shifted in his expression, there and gone before she could name it. You know it, she said. I know it, he confirmed. Nothing more. She didn't push him on it. Not yet. She folded the map and looked at him steadily. There's something you need to understand, she said. I am not your ally. I am not your partner. You are a man with a valid federal warrant against your name and I am the marshal holding it. What I am doing is following the evidence, and right now the evidence says the people who want you dead are more dangerous to this territory than you are. Understood, he said. But the moment that changes, she said, the moment I find out you've lied to me about any part of this, the warrant stands and so does my duty. He looked at her for a long moment. You always this direct? Always, she said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Good, he said. I've had enough of people saying one thing and meaning another to last me several lifetimes. The trouble arrived before breakfast. She heard the horses first. 3 of them, coming in from the south at a pace that wasn't casual. She was at the window before the sound fully registered, pulling the curtain an inch to the side. 3 riders. Stopping in front of the sheriff's office. One of them, heavy-set, dark coat, hat pulled low, dismounted and went inside without knocking. Doyle, Cade said from behind her. He had crossed the room silently and was looking over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel the controlled tension in him. The big one. That's Doyle. He'll have shown Briggs a description, she said. Or money. Probably both. Briggs will talk, Cade said. Briggs already talked, she said. The question is how much time we have before they come here. She let the curtain fall and turned. The calculation was already done. She had been doing it since she first lowered her gun the night before, running contingencies the way she always did, mapping exits and options the way her training had made second nature. We leave in 20 minutes, she said. Through the back. There's a livery stable on the north edge of town, I saw it riding in. We take what we can carry and we ride before Doyle finishes his conversation with the sheriff. My horse is gone, Cade said. They ran her off 2 days ago. Then you ride double or you walk, she said. Your choice. He almost smiled again. Double it is. She handed him the folded documents. You carry these. Inside your shirt, against the wound, it'll hurt but they'll be harder to find. He took them without complaint, tucking them carefully where she indicated. She watched him do it and told herself she was just making sure they were secure. That was all. Eliza, he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She hadn't told it to him, which meant he had known it already. Known who was coming for him. Known, and come anyway. She filed that away. 20 minutes, she said. Don't make me come looking for you. They were gone in 18. The back alley was still in shadow, the town not yet fully awake, the only sound the soft crunch of dirt under hooves and the distant murmur of voices from the direction of the sheriff's office. She didn't look back. She never looked back. But she was acutely, uncomfortably aware of the weight behind her in the saddle. His hands at her waist, light as they could be given the circumstances, and the knowledge that somewhere between the warrant in her coat and the documents against his ribs, the line between hunter and hunted had gotten very difficult to see. 3 days to mercy. She told herself that was plenty of time to find it again. The first day out of Caldwell Creek was the hardest. Not because of the terrain, though the terrain was unforgiving, scrubland giving way to broken rock and dry creek beds that the horse picked through carefully, ears forward, sensing the weight of 2 riders and adjusting accordingly. Not because of the heat, though by midday the sun was merciless, beating down on the flat open country with the kind of intensity that made the air shimmer and the horizon blur. It was hard because of the silence. They didn't speak for the first 3 hours. There was nothing to say that wouldn't cost something, and both of them, it seemed, had learned the same lesson somewhere along the way. That words were expensive. That silence was sometimes the most honest thing you could offer a person. She rode with her eyes on the country ahead, reading the landscape the way she read people. Looking for the thing that didn't fit, the shadow that moved wrong, the stillness that was too deliberate. He rode behind her and said nothing, and she was aware of him the way you are aware of a fire in a cold room. Constant. Warming. Dangerous if you got too close. They stopped at noon in the shade of a sandstone outcrop, letting the horse drink from a shallow pool fed by a trickle of spring water that had no business being there in that dry country. Eliza refilled the canteen and ate without tasting the food, hardtack and dried meat, the kind of meal that kept you alive without pretending to do anything more than that. Cade sat with his back against the rock, one knee drawn up, looking out at the country they'd come through. His color was better than the morning. The wound was holding. She had checked without asking and he had let her without comment, another small negotiation in a day full of them. You want to know about Mercy, he said. Not a question. She looked at him. When you're ready. He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat slowly in his hands, a habit she was beginning to notice. That meant he was choosing his words carefully. I lived there, he said. 3 years ago. For about 2 months. She remembered the file note. The anomaly she had never been able to explain. Longer than you stayed anywhere else. Yes. Why? He looked out at the horizon. There was someone there. She waited. Her name was Clara, he said. She ran the schoolhouse. Came out from Ohio 2 years before I passed through. One of those people who actually believed the frontier could be something better than what it was. Taught 30 kids in a room with a dirt floor and thought it was the most important work in the world. A pause. She wasn't wrong. What happened? Hargrove happened, he said. The name came out flat and hard, the way names do when they've been turned over so many times they've lost everything except their weight. He wanted the land the schoolhouse sat on. Clara wouldn't sell. 6 weeks after I left, there was a fire. The silence that followed was a particular kind, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. She survived, he said, before Eliza could decide whether to ask. Barely. The school didn't. He put his hat back on. That's why I took the documents. That's what this has always been about. She thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. She thought about it as the country changed around them, scrubland giving way to longer grass, the first hint of elevation, the distant suggestion of hills on the northeastern horizon. She thought about it as the sun began its slow descent and the heat finally started to release its grip on the day. She had built a picture of Cade Harlow over 37 months. A dangerous man. A man who moved through the world taking what he needed and leaving when it suited him. A man without roots, without loyalty, without the kind of attachments that made people predictable and therefore manageable. The picture was not wrong exactly. But it was incomplete. The most dangerous kind of wrong. They made camp as the light failed, in a shallow draw that gave them cover from 3 sides and a clear view of the trail behind them. No fire, too visible, too much of an invitation. They ate cold and sat in the thickening dark, the horse picketed nearby, the vast frontier sky opening up above them star by star. You've been doing this alone a long time, he said. She looked at him across the dark. Doing what? Carrying things, he said simply. The Aldridge case. The reassignment. All of it. Keeping it filed away, staying professional, not letting it show. He paused. It shows anyway. For what it's worth. She should have deflected. Should have kept the professional distance she had been maintaining all day with considerable effort. Instead she said, 4 years. Since my partner was killed on a case that was also closed above us. The word surprised her. She hadn't said them out loud to anyone. He didn't offer condolences. Didn't fill the space with noise. He just nodded once, the nod of someone who understood that some losses didn't want sympathy. They just wanted to be acknowledged. I'm sorry, he said. Quietly. Meaning it. So am I, she said. Later, much later, when the stars had fully taken the sky and the desert had gone cool and silent around them, she woke from a light doze to find him sitting up, fully alert, looking south. What is it? She said, her hand on her gun before she was fully awake. Nothing yet, he said. But there will be. They're not far behind us. She sat up and looked south herself. Nothing visible. But she had learned, in 4 years of doing this work, that the absence of visible threat was not the same as the absence of threat. How far? Half a day, he said. Maybe less by morning. She absorbed that. Then we ride before dawn. Yes. She looked at him, the line of his profile against the star-heavy sky, the stillness in him that was not the stillness of a man at peace but the stillness of a man who had made his peace with whatever was coming. Cade, she said. He turned. Whatever's in mercy, she said. Whatever we find when we get there, you tell me. Before we ride in. Not after. He held her gaze for a moment. Then, yes, Marshal. But this time, the way he said it was different. Less like an acknowledgement. More like a promise. She lay back down and looked at the stars and told herself that promises from wanted men were worth exactly nothing. She looked at the stars for a long time. Sleep was a while coming. They rode into Mercy at mid-morning on the third day. The town was everything Caldwell Creek wasn't: alive, purposeful, the kind of place that had decided to become something and meant it. A new schoolhouse stood at the far end of the main street, freshly painted white, a bell in the tower that actually worked. Children's voices carried through the open windows as they rode past. Cade didn't look at it directly. But she saw his jaw tighten. Saw his eyes track to it and away. The careful, practiced avoidance of a man steering around something that still had the power to undo him. She said nothing. Some things didn't need words. Judge Harlan Cross was exactly the kind of man the territory needed more of, 70 years old, iron-spined, with the calm unhurried manner of someone who had seen every variety of corruption and dishonesty the frontier could produce and had simply outlasted all of it. He read the documents in silence for 40 minutes while Eliza stood and Cade sat and neither of them spoke. When he finished he looked up over his spectacles at them both. "This," he said quietly, "is going to make a great deal of people very uncomfortable." "That's the intention," Eliza said. He looked at Cade. "And you? You understand what this means for your warrant?" "I understand it's still valid," Cade said. "It was," the judge said. He picked up a pen. "Give me 10 minutes." She found him outside afterward, standing in the street, turning his hat in his hands, that habit she had come to know as well as her own heartbeat. The warrant was gone. Dismissed. The judge's signature on a new document that told a very different story than the one that had followed Cade Harlow for 3 years. He looked like a man who didn't quite know what to do with the weight that had just been lifted off him. She stood beside him and looked at the street and said nothing for a moment. "What now?" he said. It was a real question. She could hear it, the openness in it. The unfamiliar territory of a man with no one chasing him and nowhere he had to be. She thought about Santa Fe. About the office and the chain of command and the men on page 7 who would be receiving some very uncomfortable visitors in the coming weeks. She thought about 4 years of doing everything right inside a system that had been wrong at its core. She thought about the stars over the desert 3 nights ago and the way sleep had been a long time coming. "I have some leave owing," she said. He turned to look at her. She kept her eyes on the street. "The territory is large," she said. "And I've spent 4 years seeing the worst of it." A pause. "I wouldn't mind seeing some of the rest." The silence that followed was the best kind, full rather than empty. The kind that meant something was beginning rather than ending. "I know some of the rest," he said quietly. She looked at him then. The scar along his jaw. The dark eyes that had held steady through every hard mile of the last 3 days. The man who had come to the one person he believed wouldn't be bought, and had been right. "I expect you do," she said. She put her foot in the stirrup and swung up into the saddle. He mounted behind her, easy now, familiar, his hands finding her waist without the careful tentativeness of 3 days ago. They rode out of Mercy the way they had ridden into every hard mile of this journey. Together. The territory opened up before them, vast and golden and full of everything that hadn't happened yet. And for the first time in a long time, that felt less like danger. And more like possibility. If this story moved you, if you rode every mile of it, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. There are more stories like this one coming. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have ridden off with him? I'll see you on the next one.